Hey guys, welcome back to the Better Project. This episode, it's the first episode in the new Luke studio. We have pro strongman Luke Reynolds. Thank you for coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me, bro. It's good to see you.
How's your day been? You said you went for a little hike this morning?
Yeah, good. Yeah, went for a bit of a hike up the mountains this morning. It's like I wasn't going to, but Saturday's a non-training day for me at the moment. So I usually try to do a bit of conditioning work, like just basically hiking or walking. And once I came out and the sun was out, I was like, I better come capitalise on this because it's supposed to rain, I think, a bit later. So
Yeah. I was only going to go for a short walk and then ended up doing 2.5 hour hike.
Easy to do.
Yeah, I just
following trails.
Yeah, just got on the track and just followed it. But yeah, it was good morning.
Good.
I was kind of pissed at myself. I was meant to wake up early and go do the 440 with Corey.
Okay, with Corey, yeah. It's an early start. That dude runs on no sleep, man.
He's crazy. He said he wasn't even there this morning anyway. He's away with his family, so it's all good.
Fair enough. There you go. No,
so for our listeners, you want to give us a bit of context about upbringing, who you are?
Yeah, yep. Luke Reynolds, I'm 35 years old. I grew up in Currajong Heights, just on the other side of the mountains there. I grew up in the Hawkesbury my whole life, and I've moved over this side now. That was more of I wanted to stay in the mountains, and when I was buying it, sort of over this side made more sense with access to the city and things like that. It's a bit easier. So I played rugby league for 10 years growing up, so that was sort of my foundation of sport. By the time I was sort of 19, 20, I was pretty much finished with team sports. I sort of played 5 years with Hawkesbury and 5 years with Windsor, and then I went on and did some representative stuff with Penrith Panthers and that kind of thing.
Are you play like SG Ball and that, or?
Yeah, Harold Matts and the junior grades.
Yeah, nice.
So by second year of C grade, I was pretty much finished with footy. I didn't know what I was going to do. I sort of wasn't finished with sport, obviously, but I didn't know where to head with it. I'd been training in the gym for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think I felt like I needed to do an individual pursuit then. And it's funny because at the time, Strongman hadn't really... During the 90s was a big sort of golden era of Strongman in this country, if you like. Strongman sort of in its modern incarnation started as the world's strongest man competition. Back in the late 70s it was starting to be run, and it sort of evolved into a sport in its own right, sort of more than just a freak show like it originally kind of was intended. And it had a heyday here in the 90s, which a lot of older people, like sort of my age and a bit older, probably remember. There was a Wheat Bix Super Series and that sort of thing, which used to be run at the Sydney Show, and they had big budgets. They'd bring out all the top world's strongest man competitors from overseas, but by sort of the 2000s it had kind of petered out a little bit. So I dipped for about 10 years there, and then I sort of came into it. It was funny because a mate I hadn't seen in ages, he'd moved to Bathurst. He sort of contacted me out of the blue, and we used to train together, and just general weight training and sort of, I suppose, bodybuilding style training, because strength sports weren't, we didn't really know what they were.
Yeah.
And it was funny because it was sort of forum era. It wasn't really... social media hadn't really taken off, so access to information wasn't as easy. You sort of had YouTube videos and things like that, but it's like contacting other like-minded people or even promoters such that they were at the time, it was quite difficult. But anyway, there was Dylan, my mate, there was a contest being run out at Bathurst Show, and there were some spots available for some athletes to come out and have a crack, and we'd never really trained for it. We were strong guys, like we'd always lifted, but... So we jumped in there, had a ball. We both actually drew for first place there, and we sort of went, where can we take this?
Yeah.
And sort of unbeknownst to us at the time, it was starting to have a resurgence. This is sort of 2008-ish, and there was a guy, Bill Linden. He'd been a world's strongest man competitor back in the 90s. He was 4 times Australia's strongest man, and Derek Boyer as well. He was... People sort of these days may remember him from the reincarnation of Gladiators. He was sort of Thunder, the character Thunder. And but he was a legitimate, like 8 times world's strongest man competitor. He was a great athlete. And so him and Bill together, along with another guy called David Huxley, were still running, organised strongman competitions. They were trying to rebuild it a little bit here. And so me more than Dill at that point, sort of managed to reach out to these guys and got invitations to some of the shows, and ended up at Australia's Strongest Man in the amateur division the first year, and it sort of went from there. So here I am nearly 13 years later, and 102 competitions under my belt, and a lot of injuries and surgeries. But that's basically how I got into the sport.
So that first competition just got you hooked?
Yeah, it did. I really enjoyed it. It was funny because before Dylan rang me kind of out of the blue, I hadn't seen him for about a year, which was such was our friendship. We'd just not see each other for about a year, and then we'd just catch up, and it was like old times. But it was funny because over that sort of Christmas period, I'd been watching World's Strongest Man on television, and because it was always sort of run at Christmas, and it was funny because I sat there going, wow, this looks amazing. What is this? Like, how do I get involved in this kind of thing? And it was funny out of the blue. Then he rings me, 2 months later and says, dude, there's a strongman comp. I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, that's awesome. Let's do it. So, it's funny these days because guys entering the sport now, you can go into most gyms, even CrossFit boxes, and I mean, your average gym these days will have some of the sort of iconic strongman pieces of equipment, large tyres, stones, log sleds, all these things. They sort of had their genesis in strongman. And CrossFit's obviously done wonders for it. It's sort of brought even Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting movements into the sort of, I suppose, the general populace consciousness. But so people can walk into gyms these days and kind of have access to these implements straight off the bat, and there's usually a coach or somebody around that can sort of give them an idea on how to use them. When we started, we kind of had to have things made, and just off what we'd seen on television, we had no idea of specs. I mean, the funny thing with strongman is there aren't really specs on a lot of equipment. It's sort of make them similar and it's okay. It's half the challenge, not having sort of uniform equipment. But yeah, like our first stone, Atlas stone, which is the big round sort of concrete balls, was made out of an antique lampshade that some guy out at Bathurst had, and just slapped some concrete in there. And then I had a mate who was a boiler maker, so we got some logs made up, which is one of our overhead implements, and some farmers walk implements, and just some very basic equipment. Whereas these days it's like you walk into Adonis down at Penrith there, or last round over at North Richmond or any of these gyms, and they're just packed with strongman equipment, so anyone can start straight away on them.
Is that where you train out of, those gyms?
Yeah, I'm training out of both of those gyms. Last round I have for a long time now, been there since they opened 5 or 6 years ago, and then Adonis I've started going there, and I did a podcast with those lads recently, and they've got a really big spread of strongman equipment. So I'll drop in there probably once a week and do sessions at the moment on some of the gear I don't have at last round.
Yeah, nice. Was there a certain event that kind of drew you to strongman, or?
Look, stone lifting is sort of, anyone who knows me, that's sort of my passion. It's what I'm good at. I'm the Australian record holder at the max stone and a bunch of other records, but I like the traditional sense of the stone lifting. It's it really is one of the older events. So that's probably the main one.
There's a history around that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So most sort of cultures around the world had some sort of semblance of a strength culture or basis in strength, or a lot of historical cultures did. The obvious one that everyone sort of thinks of with that kind of thing is Scotland. And then you've got the Icelandics. The Scandinavian cultures kind of lend themselves to that strength culture, and but some of the Native American cultures and Japanese cultures, and all over the world, there was usually some sort of I don't like using the term, but test of manhood, if you like, where they either use some sort of test of strength to prove your manhood or prove your worth as a warrior, as you're sort of coming of age. But yeah, Scotland definitely had that thing, and there's actually a lot of the old historic stones I've actually lifted. They're sort of, quite a few of them are still extant, and you can access them and go there, have a lift, treat them with respect, try not to do any damage to them, of course, because some of those stones have been sitting there for thousands of years, being used in exactly the same purpose. But yeah, a lot of our modern events in strongman as a sport itself are borrowed from traditional feats. Yeah, but you could say that about a lot of sports, like your Olympic throws and that sort of thing, have their genesis in Greek Olympic games and things like that. So
I seen you go out looking for rocks to pick up, and then you go. So it's tours you go on like around the world. I seen.
Look, around here. So natural stone lifting is the iconic stones, if you like, for strongman are your Atlas stones, your concrete. So perfect spheres, and sometimes if you're lucky enough, they'll be carved out of sandstone or granite or something different like that. Most of the time, you'll find they've been made in moulds and they're concrete. And so that's a way that they've sort of made stone lifting uniform.
Yep.
In strongman, just so it's sort of, you can replicate that contest after contest. But occasionally you will come up against a set of natural stones, and obviously none of those are the same. Different textures, shapes, weights, weight distributions, and depends on the locations you get them, size, things like that. So I actually quite enjoy the challenge of a natural stone. It's a brilliant way to sort of cross train as well, because they're never the same, and it's almost like a Rubik's Cube puzzle sort of thing.
Yeah, it gives you different grips as well.
It does. I like a natural stone lifting to rock climbing.
Yeah.
We sort of have a kindred spirit in the rock climbers, guys that go out and do the natural stone lifting, because it's it's very similar. The surfaces are never the same. The hold's always different. There's grip involved. And we sort of have that same respect for it. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Is there a favourite stone you've lifted?
My favourite stone of the Scottish stones is called the Fianna stone. So that's been used as a testing stone. That's in Glen Lyon, which is the longest glen, so a valley in Scotland in the Highlands.
Yep.
It's a magic location, but the history of the stone itself is quite interesting, and so that's been used as a testing stone for over 2,000 years. Its sort of nickname is Bodag, which means old man. So I've probably lifted over a dozen of the traditional stones in Scotland in various locations, and that's actually my favourite one.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Like picking up a piece of history, basically.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's fantastic. Scotland's such a lovely place anyway, even if you're not there for stone lifting, but it really is cool to sort of... it's funny, because in Spain there's a strength history there, there's a strength heritage, and it's called the Basque region of Spain, and they do Basque stone lifting. It's quite a different concept, but... it's a continuous strength culture that's never actually stopped. It's probably the only historical strength culture left in the world that hasn't really it's still continually passed down through the generations. So it's quite an amazing concept. What we're doing in Scotland by lifting stones there and places like Iceland is we're sort of paying homage to a historic culture that sort of ceased to exist, and we've sort of reignited, if you like, but... because friends of mine over there do quite a bit of the research and maintaining the websites and web pages and that sort of thing that provide the information on that and the locations, but and preservation of the stones themselves. But yeah, so it is really cool to be able to preserve that and give people a glimpse of what it is now.
Yeah, is there any rocks on the bucket list you want to pick up?
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. There is, because there's probably another half a dozen in Scotland of the main ones that I'd like to go back and do. I've been to Scotland 3 times, and it's usually, obviously now's a bit hard because you can't really get there, but it's usually off the back of I'll be over in Europe sort of doing a season, if you like. I like to go over there for about 6 weeks each year, and I'll compete in like the European circuits and that sort of thing, like Strongman Champions League and a few of the other local shows over there, because it's just a brilliant scene. So that's usually in the European summer, so I'm over there often between June and August, that sort of thing. So I'll often line up, if I'm not in Scotland for a competition or Ireland or somewhere like that, I'll try to get a few days in Scotland anyway. So yeah, there's a few more of the Scottish ones I'd like to do, but I'd like to go to Iceland.
Yep.
Lift some of the famous stones there. The most famous ones are Husfell Stone. One of our modern events, we sort of call them shield carries, which is where you carry a big sort of stone or a shield-shaped implement in front of you, usually somewhere north of 180 kilos, and then that'll be, it's hard, but that'll be for max distance usually.
Okay, yep.
And so that sort of borrows the concept from the Husfell Stone, which is a sort of a mythical lift from Iceland. Which the stone is still there and you can go lift that. In Iceland's Strongest Man, which incidentally was run the other day, they still use the actual stone in the contest. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's cool. It is cool. And it's so robust. I mean, it's never really received any damage from that kind of use, whereas some of the other historic stones, you wouldn't use them in contests because that amount of use would actually damage them. But yeah, so I'd like to lift that. Husfell, the Dridvik stones in Iceland would be cool. They're down on a black sand beach, and they were sort of used by fishermen to see who would get the largest share or whether somebody was strong enough to actually be on the fishing boat and those kinds of things. So there's really cool sort of stories behind why these stones were used.
You seem very into your history.
Yeah, history is actually a passion of mine aside from strength. So I sort of have a love of classical antiquity and that sort of era, which is sort of your ancient Greece and those types of. But having a strong history behind the sport that I love is also...
Yeah, it's good that you can match
really
it.
Cool, yeah. And it's funny. There's a lot of new guys coming to the sport, guys and girls. There's a lot of females involved in the sport these days too. And unfortunately, a lot of them, I don't think they bother to learn the history of their sport. And I think anybody involved in any activity or sport should learn and understand why their sport is what it is now and sort of where it came from. So I try to share a bit of information with people and not force it down their throat, but just So, but no, I thoroughly enjoy it. It's cool.
Have you looked into like writing blogs or stuff like that on the history of it, or?
Look, I've written a few articles over the years. There's a website and a Instagram page called Old Man of the Stones.
Yep. Now
that's maintained by a friend of mine, James Graham, in Scotland, and that is basically a really great resource. It was so Peter Martin the Sixth was a Scottish historian, and his father before him, and they were sort of instrumental in rediscovering a lot of these historic stones and the sort of the Gaelic cultures with them. And a lot of their work, unfortunately, Peter passed away about 3 years ago, but my friend James, who used to live here, but he's a Scottish guy, he's moved back home, and Martin Jensick's another guy over there, a friend of mine, they've sort of continued his work,
yep.
And they still present on the page. So I've off the back of a few of the sort of natural stone series that we've had in competitions in Australia and just some heritage here, James and I wrote a series of articles a few years back on that sort of thing. It's funny, I was down in Mount Buffalo in Victoria recently with a bunch of the lads down there, and we sort of set up a lifting stone, if you like, down at Mount Buffalo. We called it the Lake Katani Stone. So I'm going to... we were in the snow down there for that, and that was brilliant. And that was sort of paying homage to the Scottish stones,
yep.
Setting up a lifting stone here that people can go down and have a go if they like. And I'm going to write an article on that soon, and we'll chuck that up on the page and just to give the background on that one as well.
How'd you feel? You couldn't feel your hands lifting it, probably.
God, it was cold, man. I was out there in a t-shirt, and everyone thought I was crazy, but it was like, because we got there and we're like, I hope we get some snow. As soon as we got there, with like chunks this big, like 20-cent pieces coming down. We're like, okay, this is more like Scotland. And it got pretty chilly.
Yeah.
But Cam Taylor, he's a maniac. He's one of the lightweight strongman mates of mine. He was there. He went for a swim in the lake, and it's like, love that cold water therapy, man.
Yeah. Is there any history in Australia of stone lifting, or?
Look, when not so much historical stone lifting. That's more of a recent thing.
Yep.
Guys like myself, James, Jordan Steffen's another guy down in Victoria, in South Australia, and sort of we've sort of tried to rekindle it here, if you like. There is a rich Scottish heritage in Australia, which anybody would have to be blind to not see that, and even Irish heritage. I mean, when a lot of the Europeans first came here. So about 150 years ago, a lot of the Scottish, there were a lot of Scots leaving Scotland. They were sort of off the back of the Highland clearances, which is a whole other piece of history. But the Scots sort of left home, a lot of them. A lot went to Canada, a lot went to New Zealand, and a lot came to Australia. And they brought with them their culture. And so you've got a lot of Highland games, which is your traditional Scottish sports games, where we toss the caber and throw the hammer and stone pudding and a lot of your Olympic throws again have sort of borrowed from that culture. But so there are a lot of historic games, Highland games like down in Maryborough in Victoria and Geelong in Victoria, and then up here there was always Castle Hill and quite a few of them around, and that's kind of the history here.
Yeah.
What the Scots did. With their sport, and not so much of the stone lifting in and of itself. That's kind of a bit of an aside.
So there's no research around if there was strength culture in the Indigenous community, or?
Not that I'm aware of. To be fair, a lot of the strength cultures tend to be in these countries like Iceland and Scandinavia and Scotland.
European countries, yeah.
The European countries, and I think it's more when you look at the landscape, they lend themselves to it. So if you look at those countries now, they actually have a high percentage. Say somewhere like Iceland, right, has produced more world's strongest man winners
Yeah.
and top level strongman than anywhere, but they only have a population of 300,000 people.
Oh shit.
So as a percentage, it's a phenomenal amount of strength athletes, and they're quite good at sports like soccer and martial arts and things like that. But compared to somewhere like Australia, like we have a lot of space here, I think, if you look at it, and so strongman isn't really, widely known here because I think most people, they go into things like, football, running, and swimming, the sports that naturally make sense here, cricket, I tend to find those harsher in a different sense because Australia is a very harsh country when it comes to climate and terrain, but those rocky, smaller, mountainous terrains, we don't have a lot of space for field sports. It seems to generate these strong, tough people that are more into a strength culture and I suppose maybe even a more warlike cultures historically, Vikings, those sort of things. Whereas I'm not sure, but it would not surprise me if there were strength tests in Indigenous cultures in Australia. That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Some way of proving your manhood, but it may have come in other ways. Just like with some of the Indigenous cultures in places like New Guinea, where they would do that. I don't know if you've seen it, but where they would do that bungee jumping off those towers.
Oh yeah.
With the vines around their feet, which is just
crazy.
Holy hell, man! and those were like tests of manhood for the boys as they grow. They'll jump off higher and higher platforms. It would not surprise me if there was something like that was going to be a test of manhood for Indigenous cultures here. In fact, that's a really good question.
So does it go back to Vikings as well, like you mentioned?
Yeah, Vikings and earlier. So it was mainly the fishermen and the Vikings in Iceland and places like that. Something like I said, the Fianna Stone in Scotland, my favourite one there, you're talking 2,000 years, so it even predates things like the Vikings. I mean, that's sort of even back into the Roman era in somewhere like the UK. In fact, the end of Glen Lyon, there's the remnants of Roman forts and things like that, not far from where the stone actually sits these days in somebody's sheep paddock. So there's it even predates some of those cultures. Yeah,
it's crazy how the stones can stay intact over all this time, especially when people lifting them up and dropping them.
Yep, that's it. It is. It's funny when you go to the Fianna Stone again. It sort of sits. It's like this little nose, if you like, it's like a little cone-shaped stone. It has a really flat bottom, and it sits on a lifting plinth. Like a plinth is what we would typically say in a strongman comp with like a low wall or something you would load onto. And it's funny because the original plinth, it still sits on it, but it only sticks out of the ground this far.
Okay.
Originally, that was about 6 foot high.
Shit.
But over the years, because it's in the valley, the rivers come through there. The earth has actually built up around it over 2,000 years, and it's sort of basically buried this plinth by another 2 or 3 meters. The earth has sort of risen up and like built up around it, and it's only this little shelf peeking out these days. So it's funny, but yeah, the geology of it's funny because stones, we sit there and go, oh, it's a historic stone, it's been used for 200 years, but like you said, the stone itself's probably been there for 10,000 years. Yeah. Because it's much broader terms when we're talking geologically. So
it's amazing to think there's probably so many more stones out there that are undiscovered.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the thing, there's ones that we used. See, there's even ones in Denmark I've lifted and that sort of thing, and a lot of these are actually used to settle disputes in these cultures. Like, 2 people had a disagreement, so instead of coming to blows over it, it would be who can lift the stone better, or if you could balance a stone on top of another one and things like this, that would then win the argument, and you had to then, bow to that. And I know there's definitely more undiscovered, or at least sort of being discovered. Like James in Scotland, he recently he found another 1 or 2 recently that in new locations, which is really cool. And so there's always more work.
How do you know if it's a historic stone?
A lot of the time there'll be local legends attached to them.
Yep.
It'll be, so the one recently is called the McGregor Stone, and that's actually at a hotel in, I forget the actual name of the town that it's in, but it's at a sort of like a hotel, a lodge type thing, and the people there, I think, contacted James and said, we have a stone here that we know is a historic stone that's been used for, over 100 years or whatever. And so they'll often reach out, or he'll do research and contact family members, or there'll be a legend of there was a stone used for contests or something in this paddock over the years. So these guys will go sort of search through the paddocks and the stone may be gone. There's a stone called the Puderak stone. in a place called Balquhidder in Scotland, and it sits on a plinth. Now the plinth is original, and that sits in somebody's yard. Like, so you actually walk through their horse paddocks to get to it. The stone that you lift onto it now is actually a replacement. So the little church up the road actually has the grave of Rob Roy. So if you know Scottish history, Rob Roy was he's like a folk legend in Scotland during the Highland clearances and that. He actually was like a freedom fighter, if you like. So he was a bit of a rebel to the English, but to the Scots he's a hero. So he's buried there, but there's a church where the graveyard is, and the legend goes that about 100 years ago, the pastor of the church came down and took the stone and built it into the wall of the church because he didn't want the men being distracted by going down and playing stone games and lifting stones when they should have been in church.
Yeah.
So he took the stone. So since then, a replacement one has been put there to lift onto the plinth, but it's just funny. There's some cool stories.
Yeah, the history sounds crazy.
It's unreal, yeah.
What's the heaviest stone you've lifted?
The Australian record is 213 on an Atlas stone, so your concrete.
Yeah.
I hold that record. I share that record with my friend Jordan in South Australia. I'm actually preparing now to make a run. I've been invited to, if I can get there, to Perth in WA in December to try and have a crack at breaking my own record. It's been standing for 4 years, and during that time, to be honest, I've been injured a lot. I've had a lot of injuries, so I haven't really been in shape to make a run at breaking that record. Closest I came was last year. I was in South Africa for the Arnold Pro Strongman over there, and there was a 220 kilo stone in that. So if I'd done a rep on that, I would have broken the record basically. But I didn't do a rep on that, which I wasn't happy about. But yeah, I've been invited to a record breakers in December. So I've just started this past week. I've started basically the training cycle to head towards that record. So hopefully I can push it up a bit higher.
And how does training go for this? Like, what does it involve?
It's tough to train for strongman because it's like you could compare it to like a decathlon.
Yeah.
So the basis of our strength is your power lifts. Like the basis of our training is our power lifts. So squats, bench press, deadlift, things like that. Even some of your Olympic lifts, cleans, overhead presses, that kind of thing. So they help build a platform of strength. Is
deadlift in the competition?
It is in strongman, yeah. And sometimes you'll encounter a squat as well.
Okay.
Bench pressing, never. I think it's been used once over the years. We focus more on overhead presses.
Yep.
But you as a strongman, you've got those basics, and you may have to do those in competitions. But then you've also got up to say a dozen other events you need to be proficient at. So stone lifting, log lifting, truck pulls, farmers walks, stone carries, and then all sorts of variations thereof. So you've actually got to be quite skill practiced on a lot of these events, but you've also got to maintain your strength. Your base of just static strength, so you can lift really heavy deadlifts and things like that. But then you've got to have a level of fitness and conditioning to be able to run really fast between stones, run really fast with the farmer's walk, because a lot of events aren't just necessarily for the biggest weight. Sometimes they're for speed.
Yeah.
If you've got to pull a truck, and who can be the fastest at pulling a truck, you need a considerable amount of conditioning for that. And then medley events where they'll put a yoke carry, a farmer's carry and a stone carry or something like that. You might have to do all three. So if you're gassed after the first one, well, you're going to be buggered for the rest. So it's always a juggling act on how do you train for these. So historically, I've always found it difficult to make progress during the year because I've always done a lot of competitions. Like I was doing up to a dozen comps a year, which is a lot for a strongman. Especially out here because we sort of have less competitions, but I go overseas a lot. But whereas some other athletes, they may pick 2 or 3 contests in a whole year and sort of focus on that. Yeah. So then that gives them time to periodise their training. You might do a 6 to 8 week hypertrophy block, just building general conditioning, muscle size and overall strength. Then you might shift into a strength block for about 10 weeks where you start to peak your strength up. Then you might have a peaking block over, then some skills practice involved in that. So you might not do too much event work during your earlier blocks. It's sort of when you come into your peaking before a comp that you might start to include more and more of them. So you basically practice up on the skills again.
And what weight are you now and what weight do you compete at?
I'm not sure at the moment, probably sitting around 160 kg right now. At my heaviest, depends on the competition again. So if it's something that calls for a lot of speed and sort of more conditioning.
So every competition is different?
Yeah, they generally will be. So something like an Arnold Pro, part of the World Series, I'll often do some of those. They're super heavy and often not a lot of moving involved. So I'll usually bulk up really heavy to over 170 for that and try to come in as statically strong as possible, because you'll often have a super heavy overhead press, a super heavy deadlift, really heavy yoke walks, things like this. So you need to be as big and strong as possible, but not necessarily as fit.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing like a Highlander, where it might be a hybrid, so you might have some throws and some moving events, farmers walks, fast stone runs, things like that, I'll usually come in about 162, 163. So a little bit more than I am now, but I try to stay fitter and faster for those ones, because I'll need fast runs on things, not necessarily super static strength. So yeah, it's an eternal juggling act. To be fair, I'll probably try to get my weight up for this sort of next run. I'll need to probably come in pretty heavy, up over 170 for some of these big static lifts. So.
How much food do you have to eat?
More than I do. I've got a terrible appetite, to be honest. So I struggle to eat enough calories. You've got a lot of your big guys overseas, it's not an issue for them.
Yeah.
And they smash it in. But even guys like World's Strongest Man 4 times, Brian Shaw in the States, he said like it gets to the point where it becomes such a chore eating all the time, because every hour and a half, 2 hours, he's there just having a smash food into himself. He no longer enjoys it. It's purely part of the job.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets to, and that's where it becomes difficult, because you've got to have the same discipline trying to put the calories away as you do showing up to training or dealing with your recovery or doing your conditioning work. It's sort of like food and sleep, obviously, are the big ones for any sport. That's where your recovery, they're your big recovery markers. You basically get to the point where you're forcing food, and it's horrible. But it has to be done. So yeah.
Do you track your calories or just eat?
Not so much. I did recently. I looked at it, and it was probably close on about 6,000 calories a day. But you've got guys overseas that are probably sitting closer to 9,000 to 10,000 calories a day. It's a lot, considering the average punter out there is probably sitting on about 2,000 or 2.5. So, but again, they're also half our weight.
Is it all clean food, or you go for your takeaway?
Try to keep it as clean as possible, because I mean, being as big as we are is not, it's not overly healthy regardless, even though it's for a sport. I mean, there's, it does put a strain on your body. So that's why when I'm in, say, off-season periods like I am now, I let my body weight come down. I usually come down to the mid-150s.
Yep.
And instantly I feel better, I sleep better. Sleep apnea goes away. And I try to do more walking and just general health. If you try to stay, someone like Hathor Bjornsson, like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, and those guys, they're walking around at 200 kilos, like 6'9". They're just absolute monsters. So if you try to stay that big year round, it's crazy, because you need to let your weight come down and then heal up your injuries and let your body recover basically from being a strongman. It's not a healthy sport. It's hard and it hurts, and you're often always injured and you feel like crap, but that's the nature of the sport.
You'd have to drink shit tons of water, eh?
Yeah, again, another thing I struggle with, because it's like the amount I require, I feel like I'm perpetually dehydrated, but the amount of water I require is sort of, it's fairly up there. So I'm probably at least putting away about 6 litres a day, but even then I feel like I'm dry all the time. I probably need to be putting more like 8 away. And then a lot during a training session and those sorts of things. So,
what's your recovery like? Because obviously all that heavy lifting is going to burn down your body a lot.
Yeah, it does. And I've got a ton of injuries and surgeries, like I said, to sort of testify to that. But yeah, it's not too bad. And that's, again, the juggling act of structuring your programming, not just go in and murder yourself in the gym or on your event training, or even with your, go for hikes. You got to be careful to make sure you're going hard enough without. So at the moment I'm on a three-day week training, whereas in the past I may have done, or in other blocks depending on the goals, I'd be doing 5 or 6 days a week. At the moment I'm training sort of, they're quite long sessions, probably 2.5 hours, but only 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then doing some conditioning in between on those days, and that allows me to recover in between.
Do you have a lot of rest periods between exercises, or?
Not really. Sometimes if it's going for a max or a really heavy thing, traditionally I've been quite a fast trainer. Like I don't dick around in between. A lot of guys will tend to be more powerlifters will take larger breaks between their lifts because they're working in quite high percentages a lot of the time. For strongman, I have to get programmed that and do the programming that it'll be like only 90-second breaks between some of my lower percentage volume stuff and those kind of things, and that's to build a bigger motor under you to create a greater work capacity, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you have a coach?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
How do they help you? Like just planning out your training and all that?
Yeah, helping me work with my programming. We bounce ideas off each other and so it's been really good.
So what are some of the injuries you've had?
I've torn both biceps off, so I've had both of those reattached.
See the scars
there?
there?
Got scars everywhere. I've broken ribs, nose, jaw, wrist. Not all of these are strongman.
Yeah.
Some of these are from rugby league, some of these are from dirt bikes over the years.
Yep.
Ankle. I've had 3 knee surgeries, full knee reconstruction. Most recent was the bicep reattachment on my left arm as far as surgery goes. I tore my pec off, my right pec, so that's only hanging on by a thread. I tore that off in January, and then down on that trip down Mount Buffalo 2 months ago, I tore my hamstring.
Yeah.
So that was black and blue for a little while there. That seems to have settled down. It wasn't a catastrophic tear, but it's not pretty.
How does that affect you? Have you ever got the thought of, maybe retiring or?
All the time. It's and that's the thing. It's some guys do that. I've been in this sport a long time now. 12 years in strongman is actually quite long, especially in Australia. There's not a lot of guys been around any longer than I have, and it's tough. And I sort of pride myself on toughness and mental sort of strength and the ability to keep coming back from the adversity sort of presented. And it's something I say to people new to the sport. It's like, and even Rob Kearney, he's an American pro, and he put up a really good post the other day about like, if you're doing strongman, you're not going to be an overnight sensation. Is sort of how he put it. Like it took him 8 years to get the world's strongest man. He's one of the best in the world now, but he's like, I lost a lot of competitions along the way. I got injured a lot along the way. It's like, how much do you want it? Because there's no money in strongman, not real money.
Yeah.
Even in the pro level, it's more like you're pro in name only. You're often digging into your own pocket to get to a lot of these shows and things like that. It's not like other professional sports where there's, make a real living out of it. Most of us have jobs and things like that as well. So, but yeah, it's depends on your own individual motivation. Why are you actually doing it?
Yeah.
For me, I don't even know sometimes, but I love it. And yeah, I've always had a defiant streak, I suppose. So each time I get knocked down, but there is always a period after an injury. And most athletes or anybody really will experience it when they go through it. Sort of like, I've worked so hard to get to this point, and I was just about there, and then I got knocked back down again. And it can be something like a bicep tear. That's a minimum of 6 months out. Like, you have your surgery, and then there's rehab, and then to build back up to not just being able to do a local show, but to go and compete and hang with the pros. It can be up to a 12 to 18 month turnaround, because it takes you that long to build your strength back up to where you need to be and sort of have that confidence. So it's a mental test every time. And I've sort of, since 2016, I've done a lot more international and pro stuff, but I've also had more catastrophic injuries in that time, and I really had a low point at the end of last year. I had a couple of really bad injuries back to back and a few other things going on in my life, and I was sort of like, wow, is this time for me to walk away finally? Like, after all the injuries I've kept coming back from and all the defiance and all the rest of it, me just getting back up after being knocked down every single time, is this where I actually walk it off? Thankfully, I answered that myself and said, no damn way.
Yeah.
I had other people say to me, do you want to retire? And they just put it to me bluntly, do you want to retire? And I just, without even thinking, would just blurt out no. And they go, there you go, there's the answer. Because you didn't have time to sit there and go, toss up life and all these things. It was just like, and that's when I went, it's not time to retire. Yeah. And 35 sounds old for other sports, but it's not in strongman. You're sort of in your prime, basically, because it takes so long to get so strong. Most of your top pro strongmen are in their 30s. So
but it's like any sport, it's evolving. Athletes are lasting more longer now.
Yep, they are. And I mean, it was originally said that strongman, you've got about a 10-year shelf life.
Yep.
But it depends how well you can manage your injuries and things like that. But again, the sport has evolved, but that's also meant it's become harder and heavier. But yes, technologies and recovery methods are improving. We're knowing more and more about sports science and all sorts of things. So there are better technologies available and methods for recovery. If food's available, food is more plentiful these days. It's like, there's a lot more going for us.
And what is your recovery like? Just eating well and sleeping, or you?
Eat well. Sleep's the big one, and sleep's one that I will struggle with sometimes. Sleep is probably the most underrated recovery thing there is. Everybody, needs it. We need it, otherwise we drop dead. But yeah, look, eating sufficient food and sleep are your two big ones, and then hydration.
Yep.
Right behind that, and then something I've been bad with historically is sort of mobility work and stretching and those kinds of things. So I'm because I'm getting old, those are becoming more important.
Yep.
That sort of helped me work through some issues with even getting positions on lifts because some of my mobility was buggered. So I've done a lot of work on those. But I finding getting fitter so that your body's actually fitter and more efficient at doing what it needs to, transporting oxygen and nutrients, it has made a big impact. And just doing more general conditioning in the off days, active recovery, things like that, moving, not just sitting still and go and sit on the land and go stiffen up. It's a lot of guys get into and massage. I get massage when I feel I need it. I don't do it all the time. A lot of people are getting into your cold therapies and things like these days. I don't put a lot of stock in them, but a lot of people do. So that's their choice. Yep. But yeah, they're the main ones, mate.
What do you do for work? Because obviously you've got to fund all your way around the world.
At the moment, I'm sort of in between careers. So I'm working towards a few things at the moment, but I'm nothing sort of locked in concrete at the minute. I recently joined the RFS actually, so that was pretty cool. But that's obviously volunteer.
Yeah.
I worked for a civil engineering company for 12 years.
Nice.
I left there in December last year, and I'd sort of had enough. But I'm finished with that industry too, I think. So.
What kind of direction are you looking to head in?
At the moment, I don't know. I'm enjoying the firefighting side of things, so I was like, maybe I could push in that direction. I'm speaking with a few other athletes in Western Sydney, and we're sort of looking at moving towards the mentoring space for young troubled kids and that kind of thing. So I'd like to explore that kind of thing more. I go down and talk and chat with a few of the footy teams and young kids down at some of the local footy clubs and that sort of thing. I really enjoyed doing that, speaking with the next generation of athletes, and I'd like to sort of explore doing that more. And on a more full-time basis. So.
Yeah, that'd be awesome because a lot of kids do need a mentor in their life.
100%. And as we know, Western Sydney, there's a lot of troubled kids out there. And sometimes I found even some of these footy kids, they're already playing sport, but it's like they just need like one person in their life to tell them that it's all right to reach and to try to be excellent at something. Even if you fail, it's like just have a crack, and it's okay to try to excel and that they should believe in themselves and have a go,
Yeah.
And sometimes some kids, they've never even had that once in their life. So it can be as simple as that kind of influence can do people a world of good.
So talk to me about Strongman. How old were you when you went pro?
I turned pro in 2016. So I qualified for my first Arnold Pro, which was in Melbourne in March in 2016.
Yep.
And so... what was that, 4 years ago? So I was 30, 31, that sort of, I was 30, because I hadn't turned 31 yet. And that was a big wake-up call, because the jump from, like, open amateur to pro is, like, vast. Yeah. It's like, I've said it before, it's like, it's greater than the jump from novice to open amateur. Like, it's a huge leap, and, I got my ass kicked in that one. I was up against Thor from Game of Thrones, and he won that contest, and then Zydrunas Savickas from Lithuania, he's the undisputed GOAT of our sport. He's the greatest of all time, and he was in that contest, and it was great because I was kind of starstruck because I was out there like as a fan. Yeah. I'm still a fan of the sport, so every time I compete against these best guys in the world, I'm like, okay, you're here as an equal at the moment, compete against them and then be a fangirl afterwards. So I've got to sort of get my shit together because I'm still a fan of the sport as well.
Did you get any selfies or what?
Yeah, of course. Always, but it's cool because it's cool. Then I sort of pinch myself and go, okay, you're here as one of them now, like be the athlete while you have to and then hang out with them afterwards. So yeah, it's pretty cool to sort of call some of the strongest men of all time friends now. It's really cool.
And what's that community like? Is it all open arms or?
For the most part, yeah, yeah. In fact, the camaraderie in strongman is probably like nothing I've experienced in other sports, like especially individual sports. So I know sort of athletics is bad for it, and a lot of individual sports they can be quite narky, and
Yeah.
and athletes and even parents and things like that are sort of a bit combative towards each other, which I think is quite a shame. But I understand the competitive nature of these things. But trust me, nobody is more competitive than strongmen, and but often your biggest nemesis in strongman when you're at a contest against them, they're also your biggest fan.
Yeah.
They're the one there cheering you on, helping you in between events. And people have often asked me, why is that? And, you know, I've had conversations with world champions online, and I have people contact me quite a bit out of the blue, just like ask me for advice. And I'm often quite free with my advice and just like help the next generation through it. And you'll find most of the top guys are, if they've got the time to, they will take the time to speak to pretty much anyone. And people have said, why is that? And I think it's, I think when you beat people, you want to beat them at their best.
Yeah.
So you want them out there performing. You don't want these default wins because somebody broke their leg or something, and then you won because, you know, you want to beat them at their best, because if you're going to take that glory, you want it to mean something. But also I think because strongman is such a tough sport, it asks so much of you mentally, emotionally, and physically. And this could be said of a lot of sports, but I think we respect each other for even doing what we do. And if you can reach the pro level in strongman, I mean, you've really made some sacrifices in your life and dealt with some pain and some shit to get there. So I think there's a general respect that comes from actually achieving just that status. And to be fair, when it comes to strongman, there's no money or real fame out of it. So the respect and respect of respected peers is probably the greatest thing you can achieve. And for me, that's enough.
Do the top athletes get paid or not?
So the top 10 in the world will get paid a certain amount. With the Arnold series, they'll have their flights covered, accommodation, things like that. There's prize money for the top 6 at each of those. But we're not talking sheep stations here. So World's Strongest Man, you might win 60 grand.
Oh, okay.
And you've probably spent 100 to get yourself there and get ready for it. So it's sort of like fighting, like UFC. Everyone sees Conor McGregor walking around with, you know, millions of dollars. It's like, yeah, but most of your fighters aren't earning that. They might spend 40 grand on a camp getting ready, but they might only, if they win a fight, they might win 50 grand.
Yeah.
So what, they're 10 grand ahead, but then they've got to pay all the people that were involved in it. It's like, so oftentimes your lower level fighters and strongmen are all working full time. Even some of your top pros, I mean, I'm a pro, but some of your top pros in Europe still have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
In America, and, you know, it's sad to be honest, there's not enough money in it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the one thing really holding the sport back from going even further.
Is it starting to evolve or just...
It is, yeah. It's definitely making leaps and bounds. It's just, I mean, the funny thing is, over here, there aren't really any television deals for strongman, and a lot of mainstream sponsorship that existed in the 90s doesn't exist now. But in Europe, it does more so. I mean, like I've said before, I'm on television every week over there. Some of the events I've done in front of 60 million people. Over here, nobody knows who the hell I am. It's like, it's just different. I think Australia just has a different attitude towards strength sports as well.
Is it big in America, or I know CrossFit's big over there?
Yeah, it's bigger in America, but again, you got 33 million people, so 330 million people. So it's like there are more athletes, and it seems bigger, but as a percentage, is it bigger? I don't know. It's much bigger in Europe, and more money seems to go into it. And I thoroughly enjoy competing in Europe because. And it's quite good in the UK as well, but I enjoy competing over there because you sort of get treated with more respect and looked after a little better than over here. You're kind of nobody, so it's but no, I enjoy it still. It's like I said, it's not the reason I do it. Money's not the reason I do it. It's other.
It's for the love of it.
Yeah, it's other driving factors. Yeah.
So where are some of the coolest places around the world you've competed?
Norway always pops straight into my head. I've competed in Norway twice at FIFA, which is way up in the mountains, and that was the IHGF World Stonelifting Championships. And yeah, so I've competed there twice. I was supposed to go there last year, but it clashed with the Arnold Pro World Series in Barcelona, so I had to choose which one to do, and as far as my career goes, the Pro World Series was more important. So I went to Barcelona instead. So Barcelona's a wicked place. I really enjoyed that too. I've been all over the world now though with it. I was in central China last year. That was a hell of an adventure actually. We were basically in Tibet And that was the Chinese paid. That was all paid for, and that was a crazy 6-day adventure with 5 other Aussies and a bunch of crazy Russians, and that was wicked. I drew equal first for that comp actually with another Aussie guy, out of 25 athletes from around the world. So that was pretty cool. And like I said, I was in South Africa last year. I've competed in England, Scotland, Ireland, Portugal. Portugal was cool. The Netherlands, Germany, Norway, China. I've been all over the place. Yeah, it's cool.
Where's your favourite destination?
I not as far as competing. I love being in Scottish Highlands. I feel like I'm home. Because I've got a lot of friends and sort of that I basically count as family in Scotland, so I spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time in Denmark, but I haven't actually competed there because, again, I have family there. But as far as favourite places to compete, Norway, like I said, is up there. And I'm in New Zealand a lot.
Yep.
I'm probably in New Zealand 2-3 times a year for competitions. Probably the most places I go are there. I love New Zealand. But yeah, probably Norway is probably the coolest. It's always right up there just because of the setting. Yeah.
And in a competition, how many events are usually in each?
Again, depends. It might be a 2 or 3 day event. So somewhere like Norway, the IHGF World Champs there, that was 5 or 6 events over 2 days. So it was 2 or 3 per day.
Yeah.
But you may do a strongman comp where there's 7 or 8 in one day, and those are enormously taxing. Or you may have 9 events over 3 days, or it depends. Something like a World's Strongest Man, they'll have 3 days of heats, then they'll have 2 days of rest, and if you've qualified for the final, you then have 6 events over the next 2 days. So it's basically a week-long competition. So it can be quite tough. Something like an Arnold Pro is usually over 1 or 2 days. So you might have 6 events in one day, 5 events in one day, or you might have 3 per day. So it's always variable.
How do you get through that? Like, after the first event, you must be taxed.
Yeah, and that's it. That's a very good point. It's this is where your fitness becomes important, and sort of this is another thing a lot of people need to learn is not just to compete, but how to compete. So how do you go about managing your day? So in the morning, how are you dealing with your nutrition? At night, how are you dealing with your hydration and your sleep? And then how often, where are you eating before the comp, how close to the comp?
Yeah.
And then after 1 or 2 events, how spaced out are the events? Are they 1 hour apart? Are they half an hour apart? Do you have 2 hours between them? So then you've got a lot of time and you go, okay, I've probably got time to eat in between. Can you stomach food during the day? I often typically can't eat a lot of food during a competition. So I'll try to come up with other options. I might eat some fruit or sweet things, or I'll drink calories and things like that. And then if you've then got to go into a second or a third day, first thing you got to do is get food straight into you after it, rehydrate, ice up your joints if you need to, if you've got some serious inflammation going on, take whatever you need to as far as painkillers and things like that to get through. And then you might look at maybe getting some massage that night, but again, you don't want that to be too heavy duty because then you don't want to be trying to recover from the massage itself. You may look at some spas or heat treatment if that's your thing, or cold treatment. But again, if you're competing somewhere like South Africa or the middle of Spain or so, you may not have these facilities available to you. So you've got to do the best you can with what's available. But food and hydration is always your biggest thing, and then make sure you sleep that night. Yeah,
so it all comes down to trial and error and what works for you.
It does, and this is the thing. It's like that I'm still, after years of travelling overseas, I still 100% don't nail it every time. It's like people fly across this country and they go, oh yeah, I flew 4 hours from Perth or wherever, and it was tough to compare. It's like, nah, that's easy. Fly 30 hours across the world and then try to adapt to that time zone, which is a different climate zone, and then try to work out where the best thing for you to do is come in the day before the competition and just run with the jet lag or as best as possible and just stay tired and compete, or do you come in 3 or 4 days earlier, try to adjust? I did that with Barcelona and I didn't adjust. I came in, I felt exhausted by the time the comp came around and got killed. Or do you fly in 2 weeks earlier? But it's, again, can you afford to fly in 2 weeks earlier and accommodate yourself for that period? And it's like, and then the other thing is when you go somewhere, when I was in central China, mate, can't get normal food. Can't get what I consider normal food or what I'm used to. So it's like I'm having to deal with foreign foods then. And that's another consideration. Is what you're eating going to upset your stomach? Is there the same hygiene considerations? Are you then going to get... I mean, they had World's Strongest Man in southern China a few years back, and like 90% of the athletes got horrendous food poisoning and were like running off to the toilet mid-event because it just killed half of them. And it was... these are considerations.
Yeah. So how do all the leagues work? Like, is there certain grades or...
Yeah, so at the top you've got the two top shows are the Arnold Classic Ohio.
Yep.
So that's the final of the Arnold Pro World Series.
So you compete around the world and then...
Yep, and then the top 10 go through to the final in Ohio, so that's in March. And that's the original Arnold Classic. And then you've got the Giants Live, which I'm wearing a Giants Pro shirt.
Yep.
So Giants Live, that's basically the qualifying world tour for World's Strongest Man. So World's Strongest Man is still the top title, if you like. The Arnold World Series is probably, honestly, heavier and harder, but the World's Strongest Man carries the prestige because, that title's been the original one forever. So, yeah, the Giants Live Series is the other one. Then you've got... It never used to be, but I say you would step down a tier, and then you've got Strongman Champions League, which is heavily based in Europe.
Yep.
And that's a really cool World Series as well that I have competed in, but it's probably a step behind the other two now. It's not quite as hard and not quite that really top level of athlete at the moment. And then below that, it's basically individual pro shows, maybe put on by individual sort of lone wolf promoters here and there internationally. But then you've basically got the open amateur levels. And then you've got weight classes down below that. So Strongman, when it originally came in, was only really, it was just the strongest. It was just like, whatever weight you're at, come compete. I mean, originally Strongman was like, they'd grab a footballer, a wrestler, a bodybuilder, a powerlifter, and they'd sort of pit them against each other. People weren't actually just strongman athletes. But then, as it's evolved into a sport, we're actually specialised athletes now. But so you've got, I think the last weight classes in the men's are the under 80s, then under 90s, under 105. So under 105 was the first weight class that sort of came in after when they started going, because we need lightweights because there's smaller guys that can't necessarily compete with the heavier guys. And then you've just got 105 and above, which can go up, those guys over 200 kilos. And then you've got the women's these days has evolved as well. There's now women's strongman or strongwoman. And I think their weight classes are under 65, under 82. And some federations are slightly different with that, and then opens as well.
Is there strong women out there, or?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there's some very strong women out there. Actually, there's your top open weight pros in the women's are Andrea Thompson and probably Donna Moore. They're both from the UK.
Yeah,
mate, they're outlifting some of the guys out there. Not necessarily the pro guys, but there's a lot of guys walking around calling themselves strongmen that probably shouldn't because they're getting smashed. So there's and to be fair, the most competitive in the women's divisions these days is probably the middleweight women, the under 82s or whatever they are. And mate, there's some very, very good athletes in there. Very strong, very fit and fast. Yeah, it's actually quite impressive to watch. It's evolved into its sport in its own right now. So it's probably the last 10 years, but probably the last 5 years it's really taken off. So
are the competitions in the same place every year?
No, they're not. World's Strongest Man always moves.
Yep.
And World's Strongest Man was originally developed as a television show, so it's always in a pretty exotic location. And, so that's usually in a different location each year. That's in Florida later this year. I don't know why they've picked Florida again. They did it last year, but it's like COVID central over there at the moment. So I don't think that'll go ahead, but we'll see. The Arnold pros generally are there because they're tied with the Arnold bodybuilding shows as well,
so
and the Arnold sports festivals. That's right. So the Australian one's in Melbourne, and they got cancelled this year, unfortunately. Then there's Brazil, South Africa, which is in Johannesburg. Then you've got there's one that's sort of tied to it, but it's not really within a sports festival, but it's classed as an Arnold Pro Show for the strongman. That's in Canada. Then you've got the Arnold Europe, which is in Barcelona. That may change because Eddie Hall's pushing to bring the Arnold to the UK. Now, if the UK one takes off, it'll probably actually have a lot more legs than the one in Barcelona does. So I think the Barcelona one will probably die out, and the UK will take over as the Europe one. And then, what else is there? Then there's one in Santa Monica in California. That's usually the second last one, and then you've got the final in America as well. So there used to be one in Hong Kong, so that was Arnold's Asia. And that died after 1 year. They sort of mismanaged it, and the local promoter they used, I don't think he quite understood his product, and it just lost money hand over fist. But I think there's plans in the work to go back into Asia, which is crazy if they can't make a buck there because there's billions of people. So it's like, just pick your market, like. But and then Strongman Champions League, I think they usually have about 14 or 15 legs per year, which is pretty cool. But they're generally in the same countries or slightly different venues each year.
How have the events evolved, or they kind of stayed the same?
They've certainly gotten heavier, and not too much. Not a lot of variation in them. They have sort of, from the start, they tried some kooky stuff, and then it sort of soon became apparent which ones were going to become the staples of strongman. So generally what you'll have is a deadlift of some sort. You might have just a regular powerlifting deadlift, or you might have some sort of big wagon wheel things with truck wheels or whatever, so it may be from a different height. Might be lower, might be higher. And maybe a frame that they park a car or a truck on, and then you've got to deadlift the car off the ground. Or they might do a similar thing with a squat. Or it may just be with a barbell again, so you might just have a classic powerlifting looking one. They try to make them look a bit more spectacular than just a barbell. Farmers walks, it's usually you'll have variations of each of these. So you might have it might be a super heavy one for a short distance, or you might have a much lighter one that's for max distance, so you can carry it the furthest. Or it might be somewhere in the middle, and it's who can do it the fastest sort of thing. Same with yoke walks. So yokes are like a big frame carry. They're awful, but they can often be super heavy for a short distance, or they can be for speed over 25 metres and things like that. So it's usually, they've evolved to the point where we have a bunch of variations of them, and you won't do them all in one comp. But yeah, they haven't changed that much over the last 30 odd years.
So no like quacky ones?
Look, every now and then one will rear its head, but yeah, no, I think it's fairly standardised these days. You might have a mystery event thrown in, but to be fair, that's often, they might go, oh, we've got a really heavy shot put or something like that, just to throw people. But yeah, nothing too extraordinary these days.
And what's your favourite event?
Just the stones, I think, is probably the best, because I'm good at it. I also like log lift, like the overheads. I'm pretty good with the log as well. I think I've got the New South Wales record still, not the Australian record, but... so yeah, I'm reasonable at log. I'm pretty good at farmers walk as well. I hate training farmers walk because it hurts like a bastard, but I'm actually pretty good at it. So yeah. Is
competition all Atlas stones, or they throw natural ones in there as well?
They will throw a natural series in every now and then. It's not super common, but yeah, they will every now and then. Yeah, they're pretty cool when they do show up. You'll often get them at Highlanders actually, because it's more sort of traditional, if you like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is it drug tested, or no? Everyone can do it?
Not really. It's to be honest, it's an untested sport. Yeah. There was a tested federation coming out of Hungary, but then they were. To be fair, I don't know if they're still kicking around. I did a comp with them in Hungary in about 2011, but and I saw them rear their head a few years back, but I think they were rife with corruption or something. So they ended up like locally they were embezzling money or something. So I think that died, unfortunately. But yeah, look, the straight answer is it's an untested sport. Yeah.
So basically everyone's on it.
Well, it's a personal choice, isn't it? So yeah, but it's like, it's funny. This is always a funny subject, and I'm happy to speak about it. But it's like, people would then turn around and go, "Oh, you cheat." So it's like, but it's not illegal in our sport. Yeah. So it's an untested sport. You're only cheating if it's against the rules of your sport. So let's be honest, you're pretty naive if you think everybody in every sport's not using something, but especially at the elite level, because that's just the way it works. That's the world. But people doing it in sports that are tested, that's actually cheating. You're breaking the rules of the sport. It's illegal. In strongman, it's not against the rules, so why would they be cheating?
Yeah, exactly.
It's by definition not cheating. Yeah. You know, so, but not everybody takes gear. It's personal choice.
So what's next for you in regards to strongman?
Don't know, mate, at the moment. Unfortunately, COVID's kind of thrown a spanner in the works with everything. There's actually, I think there's a local comp on, I think it's qualified for New South Wales Strongest Man on tomorrow down in Campbelltown. So there are some of the lower level stuff getting back underway, which is good, because that can sort of keep the novices and the newbies and the amateurs coming through the ranks, which is good. I know Strongman Champions League has sort of kicked back off in Europe, but again, they're in a different sort of situation to us. Excuse me. I think there's some stuff going to be underway soon in America, but as far as like actual shows for us here in Australia, I don't think there's much going to be going on. There's talk that Australia's Strongest Man, that usually happens in about November. There's talk that may go ahead, but I don't know, because typically that's been held in Melbourne. There was talk it was going to be moved up here into sort of maybe the Hunter Valley or something, but yeah, so like I said, the only thing for me on the horizon, hopefully, is the record breakers in Perth on the 13th of December. But again, I mean, WA's kind of got their borders shut at the moment, rightfully so. So we'll have to wait and see. It may be next year before anything really takes off, because I want to get back overseas when I can. Yeah.
I guess coronavirus has been good in a way for you, give you time to recover and train, and you haven't missed out on much.
Yeah, 100%. I haven't really missed anything. It's been a blessing in disguise for me, really, because, I mean, it's not ideal, but I'm not missing anything right now. I haven't had any comps I've missed. I haven't, I've just been able to train and not be stressed about anything I'm missing out on, any qualifiers I've missed. So it's it's been a bit of a load off my mind as far as just take your time. You've got basically all year to rehab your injuries, because it's very rare to get that opportunity, to be honest, where you can take that time and not feel the stress of missing out and feel rushed to come back, which I've sort of done in the past and then re-injured myself. So, it's been quite a luxury, if you like. So
besides Strongman, do you have any other hobbies or?
Yeah, look, I always rode dirt bikes, but I can't these days. I just lock them in the shed and I can't even look at them because I'll get on them and I'll hurt myself.
Yeah.
I love that. But yeah, look, I read a lot. I love reading, I love music. I love hiking through the mountains and that sort of thing. So those are probably the main ones. In summer, I love going to the beach. I'm at the beach nearly every day in summer.
Yeah.
Just swimming, but yeah, they're probably the main ones. I used to and sort of have a little collection, ancient artifacts from classical antiquity and that kind of thing that I've purchased from galleries over the years and whatnot. But those are probably the main ones, mate. Yeah.
In terms of personal development, do you do much around that, or?
As far as education and things like that, that's something I'm looking at the moment. How to sort of further that. I do, like I said, I do a lot of reading. I've usually got about half a dozen books on the go at a time and just keep smashing through them. Recently, I think probably the biggest personal development thing for me, which has been good for me mentally and sort of feel like I'm actually contributing again, is like in a giving back kind of way, is the RFS. Joining the RFS has been really cool. And I really enjoy going down and speaking with the footy lads. I'll go down there tomorrow and do that sort of thing. So for me, I think that's been helping me push through some crap I went through sort of about 6 to 8 months ago. Mentally, that's probably been the best thing as far as that. But as far as actual formal education, nothing at the moment.
Yeah.
But there will be some stuff coming up. I just need to work out what I'm going to specifically do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your why for life?
Say that again.
Your why. What's your why?
Why for life? That's a really good question, actually. I've never really been asked that one. I don't know. It's money. It's funny. I had this conversation recently, really, with somebody, and they said it's like, like I said, I was working through some crap, and I was like, what's people's driving force behind why they do things in life and why they choose certain careers and things like that. And I think you have to look at what people's individual definitions of success are. Like a lot of people, their driving force, their reason for doing things is money. They like money and they like having things and the capacity to do whatever they want, whenever they want.
Yeah.
And that means thing. And it's like, for me, having enough money to basically do what I want to do has always been enough. Money's never been a driver for me. I would have stayed with football if that was the case, instead of going to Strongman. But look, money's never been a driver for me. So then I look at, hang on, what is my driver? And it's like, I don't think I've been able to define it. I've always wanted to leave a legacy of sorts. I've always been driven by sports and achievement in that field. I admire greatness in those types of things, and admire great people, whether they're great warriors or whether they're great soldiers or great people in general, and what they contribute. I think that's more, the older I get, I'm feeling like I always thought, my legacy might have been something sporting, which after a fashion it could be, but it's always been, more recently I've sort of gone, okay, now I'm getting older, I'm thinking, what will my legacy be? And I'd like that to sort of be more along the lines of, what do I give back to people? What can I help the next generation with? And that sort of thing. And I think that's why I'm moving down the path of thinking about the mentoring side of things and being able to sort of hopefully take a bit of a leadership role in that type of thing. So I think I'd like that to be my legacy contribution back to not necessarily society as a whole, but a portion of society. But that's a really good question. It's sort of, I don't know if a lot of people actually stop to consider why. Not necessarily the whole why are we here type thing, but it's like, what makes you get up in the morning, sort of thing. And it's just like, yeah, that is a good question.
And so many people are driven by money as well.
They are. It's like, and that's how they define success. I've got a house, I've got a car, I've got, boats and shit and piles of fucking money. It's like, okay, that's cool, that's fine. Usually, unless you've come into money, it usually means you probably have worked hard and done it, but that's not my measure of success.
Yeah. And you see a lot of them, like, they're not happy. Down deep, they're not happy.
Well, exactly. That's a really good point. It's like, because I don't know if that's a clearly defined goal. It's like, get more money, but it's like, when's enough?
Yeah.
And the more you have, the more you're spending. So often people with more money have the same woes as people with less money. Like, they're just stretching their belt larger. Like, they're still got, debts and same concerns about paying bills and that. It's just because their lifestyle's expanded because they've had more money or access to more money. So, yeah, I agree. It's like, I think once they achieve that goal of having money, it's like, now what? Because I don't think there was any real, I don't know how to put it. It's like, it's not a tangible goal. I don't think you've really achieved anything. You can always make more money, but we're only here for a finite time. Why don't you do something more productive?
Exactly. Yeah, like, I want money, but I want to be able to use that money to give back.
100%, and that's a great attitude. It's like, it's funny. I watched an interview with it's quite a famous one actually. You may have seen it, but Steve Irwin.
Yep.
His life was all driven towards conservation and protecting wildlife and wilderness. And it was like, he goes, I love money. I need as much as I can get, so because then I can buy land and then I can protect it, and that's a great attitude. It's not necessarily what money in and of itself intrinsically is worth. It's what you can do with it.
Money's just a tool.
It is exactly right. It's like I said before. It's, I only ever want or need as much as I need to achieve the things I want to do. So yeah, it's money is a funny one. It's a contentious issue, man.
Yeah. And on Steve Irwin, fuck, I loved him growing up, eh?
Great guy, hey?
I actually cried when he died.
Oh, dude, a lot of people did. I still get melancholy about it, but it's I saw Bindy's pregnant the other day, actually.
Yeah, I seen a picture on Facebook. They got this photo done and with Steve put into it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it looked heaps nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah,
no, it's good. I mean, I still think they're a pretty cool family, and the kids have gone on and do pretty amazing work, really. Like, even just, if nothing else, I mean, they do a lot of conservation, but if nothing else, it raises awareness of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, they're doing great things.
100%.
Continuing Steve's legacy.
Big time. I was up at Australia Zoo. I was in Queensland in February. I was up there catching up with my brother, and I just ducked into Australia Zoo to poke around. I was like, this is pretty cool. Yeah. So
yeah, I went there when I was young. I was probably 2 times bigger than now.
Yeah.
It's always growing, that place.
Dude, big time. There's like a huge big stadium in there, and it was. I went there. It was a pretty quiet day actually. I think it was middle of the week, and it had been a bit of rain around, so it was pretty good. I could walk around the place pretty unhindered. There was virtually no one there, so it was. But no, there. But yeah, he was a guy who knew that money was a tool to be used for, the right things, not just to have it so you can sit there on a big old pile of money. What the hell's the point of that? Yeah,
we need more people like that in the world.
Certainly do.
Especially the way the world is going.
Mate, this is the thing. It's you got to be so guarded sometimes in this world because it's such an ugly world out there, but you can't be too pessimistic either, because there is a lot of beauty in the world as well. So there's a lot of good people and there's a lot of beauty in the world, but you've also got to be careful because there's a lot of shit out there. Yeah. So, yeah.
So do you have anyone that you look up to or who inspires you?
Yeah, look, you mean within the sport of strongman or just in general?
Overall.
Yeah. There's a lot of people I admire. I don't know if I'd say I have heroes as such. A lot of people I've admired over the years. A lot of them are athletes and people like I admire, say, in the non-athlete sphere, someone like Jordan Peterson. I think he's doing great things, and I'd love to have him as a lecturer in the psychology and neuroscience side of things. Someone like guys like Jocko Willink and those, they're pretty inspiring guys as well. Like former military and just machines of people.
David Goggins.
Yeah, Dave Goggins.
He's a beast.
Yeah, he's another one that's an absolute machine of a dude. Same sort of vein as Jocko, They're pretty inspiring individuals. I read a lot of biographies. An athlete like a Michael Jordan, I've always looked up to those types of athletes.
Did you watch that doco on Netflix?
Yeah, that was excellent. It's funny because not because of it, I was reading Jordan's bio at the same time. Yeah. And I was like, it was actually really cool to watch the show and read the book at the same time. It was excellent. But and then within Strongman, there was a few that were my favourites over the years that I've sort of looked up to, and I've actually met them since and consider a few of them friends. They say you should never meet your heroes, but it's like I've actually met a few of mine, if you like, and they're awesome dudes. So I don't put a lot of stock in that saying or that axiom, but like I've met Arnold Schwarzenegger a bunch of times because I'll go to the Arnold Pros when you're a pro strongman. He just comes and hangs out with you. It's which is a real buzz.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty cool, but he's a guy I've always admired. His work ethic and what he's achieved by hard work. Funnily enough, I'm reading his biography at the moment. That's one of the books I'm currently reading, just to fill in the blanks for me. But yeah, that's a guy that works for everything he has. So yeah, like I said, I don't know if I have specific heroes, but there are people I admire.
Yep.
Usually people that have worked hard for what they have and have faced adversity and haven't backed down from it.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody I really admire is Sir Ranulph Fiennes. So I don't know if you've heard of him, but his biography is Mad, Bad and Dangerous to Know. I read that recently. He's a UK polar explorer.
Okay.
That's a worthwhile book. That dude, like, you want to talk about fortitude and toughness, and just he's set most of the records, or a lot of the records, of crossings of Antarctica, the Arctic, and climbing. He climbed Everest at like 65 years old. He had a heart attack when he was like 60 years old, and then 3 months later did 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents.
Fuck.
So he was like dealing with jet lag, flying to the next continent, and then running another marathon. It was just like some of the things that dude's achieved at late stages of his life are just, dude, the rest of us are a bunch of pussies.
Yeah, there's some crazy people.
It's just that kind of endurance and fortitude and toughness. It's like you can't quantify it. It's just it has to be admired, and then when you read those things, it helps you search within yourself and think, damn man, when I stopped that day, or if I did, or you need to look within yourself and find something more, and these people can show us how.
Have you read Goggins' book?
No, I haven't. Is it good?
Yeah, get onto it. It's awesome.
It's funny. I went looking for it the other day. I couldn't get it. So like down at the bookstore. So it's definitely what I'm seeking at the moment.
Yeah, that was an awesome read. Really enjoyed that one.
Good. Yeah, I thought it might be. That's why it's funny because I saw a clip of him the other day somewhere on social media. I was like, that's the book I've got to get next. Like I was sort of putting it in the back of my mind and hadn't got it yet. So yeah. And someone, actually, in a different field, somebody I look up, or not necessarily look up to, but admire, and somebody who has an insane work ethic and drive, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
That dude's a phenom, He's like a modern day, like, real life Tony Stark, isn't he? Like,
yeah, I've listened to his podcast.
He's a machine. I've read his biography, and he's just, he just like wills things to happen. Like his work ethic's insane. And his drive and his belief in his own abilities, and he's obviously his intelligence, but people like that, man, they're visionaries. They're not regular people.
He's on a whole new level, that guy.
Oh, dude, seriously, he's great. So that's a book worth reading.
Yeah,
read his
I think I got that on my shelf. I just got to read it.
Yeah, get into it. It's a great read. Yeah.
So where do you see yourself in the next few years? Do you have big goals or?
Yeah, look, I'm coming back from these last injuries. I'm going to take another run at the pro world. Basically, I'll like I said, I've taken this year to get. I think I've got at least one more good crack at the try and not just be there, but make an impact, make people notice me, sort of thing, and really have an impact at that pro level. So that's my current goal as far as strength is concerned. I'm moving into the coaching space a little bit as well. I'm sort of taking on clients now to do a little bit of coaching on the side, mainly with the strength side of things, of course, and just again have my fingers in a lot of pies when it comes to sort of trying to display leadership, but yeah, I'm not sure specifically yet. I'm quite excited to find out, but it'll happen in turn. Yeah,
I see you helping Corey out with the world's strongest marathon.
Yeah, young Corey's batshit crazy. Yeah, no, it's funny because I remember when the other guy is Ross Ainsley or something like that. That set the record. I think Corey can smash it, to be honest. But I remember when he was doing that guy a few years back, and I was just like, man, why the hell would you want to do that? And then Corey contacted me sort of out of the blue. He's like, I'm doing this. I said, yeah, cool. Let's meet up. And yeah, no, he's a good guy, Corey. So I'm definitely supporting him there.
So how you been helping him? Just
yeah, I've gave him a harness to practice his pulls on. It's probably a touch big because it's for someone like me, but it was better than the sling arrangement he had. And just we catch up every couple of weeks and have a coffee, chat about stuff. And I've linked him up with a strength coach that I think can sort of help him with his unique requirements. For he's such a unique athlete in that he's sort of bridging the world between endurance and strength. And not just endurance, like going for a bit of a run. It's like doing ultras. You know what I mean? It's a whole different world. And then turning around and doing strength based stuff. It's the complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So for an athlete to combine those is quite unique and cool. So yeah, no, I'm helping him just with a bit of advice, chatting to him about stuff, point him in the right direction, link him up with the right people if coaching and that sort of thing. So just helping out where I can, basically. Yeah.
It's fucking crazy, man. Pulling that amount of weight for a marathon.
Yeah, it's not something I want to do. Like, I'm happy to pull like 30-ton trucks for 25 metres and just leave it at that.
Yeah, he's a great bloke, but fuck, he's batshit crazy.
Kid, so yeah, no, it's but I admire his drive.
Yeah.
He's driven to achieve things. It's like I'll always support that kind of thing. It's not enough of that in the world. Not enough people reaching. Humans are capable of such greatness if only they reach. Problem is most of the time people don't reach.
We like to stay in the comfort zone.
We do. It's too easy because people don't like failure. They're just like scared of it. And it's like, which is fair enough. Failure sucks, but you can learn from it.
Yeah, every failure is a learning experience.
Exactly. It's the next step towards your success. It's just like, I was listening to the thing before. It's like, it's not the end. It's the start of your comeback. It's exactly right. There are roadblocks in life. It's if you keep getting back up, eventually you can turn that to success. So yeah, it's just part of it. Like all the greats fail.
Exactly.
It's just what there is, mate. Failure is just a stepping stone.
So last question: when your time's up on this earth, what would you like to be remembered for?
I mean, strength feats are cool. So, I'd like to leave some sort of legacy as far as that's concerned and be considered a great strength athlete. But I think overall, someone who inspired other people, someone who gave back and sort of helped others realise that they can be great.
Yep.
That'd be pretty cool, I think.
Sweet. And for all the listeners that want to find out more about you, where can they follow you?
Yeah, just check me out on Instagram. It's probably the easiest.
Yep.
Just Luke Blue Mountain Reynolds. And that's the easiest way to follow what I'm up to.
Sweet. Well, thank you for coming on, and I wish nothing but success, man.
Awesome, brother. You too. And thank you very much for having me.
All good. Keen to see what you bring next year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, brother.